Hey, welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. I'm Matt.
And I'm Brian. We appreciate you guys checking out this show today. Today we're doing Winter Interest Japanese Maples Part 3.
Hey, we're back with Part 3 since Part 1 and 2 were so popular. We hope you enjoy Winter Interest Japanese Maples. We greatly appreciate your patronage to Mr. Maple. And if you like Winter Interest Japanese Maples, subscribe to the channel. If you like Winter Interest trees, share this video. And if you like Winter Interest trees, make sure to sign up for our 10 at 10 on MrMaple.com.
Hi, I'm Tim Nichols, and today's video on Winter Interest Japanese Maples, I think you'll really enjoy it. The part 3 of the series. People have been loving these because coral bark Japanese maples and these other unique colors provide such unique interest in the winter landscape and garden.
Yeah, we talk about it in our why do people like Japanese maples, but Japanese maples provide that ever-changing beauty, and winter interest trees just give you a whole nother season to extend that color. They're that spark of interest in the winter garden when everything's out of leaf. And so we're out of leaf right now. We're actually in February 2022. We're going to do a little bit more of a dive into some different winter interest Japanese maples that kind of look great right now. And they're kind of one of my favorite times of the year to look at them when they're out of leaf.
So our very first Japanese maple we're talking about today is Acer Palmatum Sir Damon. This is one that develops almost a pink-red bark. So the bark color is very different and unique than a lot of the other coral bark selections. This is a selection by our good friend Crispin Silva, and it's one that I really like simply because that bark color is so different and so unique. It's almost like you take a coral bark and then you just go to the color contrast and move it towards the pink red. I mean, it really adds something extra in the landscape and garden.
So Crispin has some of the best selections. I love his whole catalog. He's named so many interesting plants. You know, I often tell him and Talon Buckholtz are some of my favorite people at naming Japanese maples, and this one's no exception. He has a great listing of introductions there. Sir Damon just has that really picked up pink red, and so it looks even one of the brightest reds in that winter month, so it really picks up the colors. And it's one I think you're going to love in that winter garden because it just gets bright. It gets extremely bright, and it just shows out. It gives you exactly what you want in a coral bark, I think.
Yeah, I like Sir Damon because of that bark color that's especially unique and different. A lot of Crispin's selections, sometimes he's named them after his sons, like DJ's bow tie is a ginkgo that he's introduced. And Sir Damon is another one's named after one of his sons. And it's kind of cool whenever you have someone who's naming plants after their children. It's sort of like passing down that lineage. And this is a unique colored bark. It'll stand out from your typical coral bark because it's a little bit brighter with that pink-red color.
So next up is one of our more requested plants in some of our Part 1 and Part 2. We're going to talk about Acer Palmatum Bihu, and that's this one here on the table. Acer Palmatum Bihu is a classic for having bright yellow bark. Now going into the winter months, this tree's going to have more softer neon yellow bark. Coming into the spring months where we're at right now, it's actually going to get more orangey yellow bark. So it actually has more orangey color in the spring as it's getting closer to leafing out.
In Part 1 and Part 2, people in the comments said, what about Bihu? So we had to include it in today's video for Part 3.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, there's a lot more winter interest, and we have even more than this as well. But Bihu is a spectacular favorite because of that yellow bark. This is a plant, we often use our photo from Elton from Plant Man Landscaping, and he has an amazing Bihu we got from us that he's pruned back.
Yeah.
That has just a phenomenal shape. Really shows off that bark interest extremely well.
It's a perfect example how pruning at the right time and at the right time of year can increase the growth rate and really accentuate that yellow bark the best. We'll be doing a pruning video hopefully, but it's a great way to look at how to prepare these to have their best success for sure.
Now this is a plant that is phenomenal in the winter interest. I mean, it's got that yellow bark that really stands out. It's a great tree to pair with your typical coral bark or sangukaku or any of these other ones with red barks because of that yellow gives such a dynamic contrast with the other ones. This is one that you want to make sure has good drainage, and you want to make sure that in the hotter parts of the south it gets some protection from the hot afternoon sun. My favorite time of the year for Bihu, believe it or not, is I love it during the winter and I love it during the spring. In the summer, it's great with the green on the yellow, but the fall, when this tree has the yellow fall color with the yellow bark, it just looks like a highlighter in the landscape.
Yeah, it looks unreal because you've got that bark interest and you've got that yellow, fall color, and they're both glowing. And I mean, it's a fun time. I think we've tried to get in some and take some pictures of them at that time of the year because they're just amazing. A truly spectacular tree. every single season in the garden. One that's always used for that winter interest contrast with the classic coral barks, but one that's going to go out and look good every single season. The key for this one, like Tim said, really good drainage, and we list this one zone 6 through 9. It does a little better in the drier, warmer climates we've noticed than wetter. You definitely don't want this one being too wet continuously.
And this is one that was brought back from Japan by our friend Brian Upchurch. He brought this back from Japan. We got it. We were one of the first people after he brought it back. And this is one that really adds something special and something different in the landscape and garden. We're big fans of bringing Japanese maples back into the nursery trade. We contacted the National Arboretum and said, hey, what do you have that's not in the nursery trade? They sent us their list. Winter Red was one of them. It was given to them by Foxborough Nurseries in Maryland, and we got it into production and got it back in the nursery trade because it is something that's very unique, and it's a coral bark that has more of a red color. So it's actually a deeper red, a more bold red often than Sengokaku.
Yeah, it's normally one of the darker red shades. This is an excellent tree, sometimes confused with Winter Flame that we talked about in a previous video. The Winter Flame being a smaller form with a more crumpled leaf, and this being a larger form of that darker red bark. Excellent in that winter garden though. It definitely stands out as one of the most bold, dark red interest.
And this is one that I really like because that bolder red color contrasts excellently against the green. Good yellow fall color as well with a lot of the coral barks. But it just is a little bit bolder than the other colors. You want to give a lot of these coral bark selections some sunlight to really pique that bark interest. In shaded, more muted tones coming from a cold frame or a setting right here where they're in like 55% shade, it may be a little more muted, but by putting it out where it gets some sunlight, that winter interest is going to peak up and give you some much brighter colors.
So Winter Red goes through some great color changes. It's going to leaf out with that more lime green, soft green foliage, and then go to more of a Kelly green midsummer, and then an excellent shade of golden yellow in the fall. What really distinguishes this one is that darker red bark in the winter months. It's going to have one of the best bold red barks, and I think it's one that's definitely going to stand out in your winter garden. So next up, we have another great winter interest plant. We're going to be discussing Acer Palmatum Dixie Delight. Now this was an introduction by our late friend Mike Francis. He had some really fun plants. He was doing kind of a Dixie series there, and Dixie Delight was kind of his fabled plant that a lot of people were after that really hadn't hit the market yet. I remember visiting Mike and I said I'd like to buy a Dixie Delight, and he said I don't have any available. And then he went in the back and came out with one and gave us one, and we were so excited to get this tree into our collection and get it into production.
Yeah, I think that was one of our more favorite plant trips because going down there, this is a plant we wanted so badly. And I really like this plant because it's so unique and different. Where a lot of the other coral barks are more upright, this one for us always tends to be very multi-stemmed. And so it gets more and more shrubby as it goes on, which gives a very unique appearance for a coral bark. There's not many other coral bark selections or winter interest selections that have more of that shrub-like appearance.
It keeps it a little smaller overall because a lot of the energy goes into making it multi-branched, and it's definitely a defining feature of this one. It doesn't want to be a single stem. If you're growing this one, it's always going to have one place where it's grafted, but then a lot of multitude of branches coming out from there. So you're going to get that very multi-stemmed, thick appearance to it. And some great bark interest. This one, Francesca joked this one could be called Flamingo because it goes through so many color changes. These will be pink. There'll be yellow, there'll be flashes of orange in that bark as well. So a lot of fun color changes. It's definitely one that's going to keep you interested all winter in that change.
Yeah, it's one that I really like because it really stands out from the crowd in its shape, in its bark color, and being a Dixie Delight, it's got a great name for the South. Give it some protection from the hot afternoon sun in the deep South, but this is a plant that's really going to stand out in your winter landscape and garden.
Yeah, I find that because of that multi-stemmed approach to it, it's an excellent tree for the container garden. You're going to get a lot of what you like about it in a small space. So because of that multi-stemmed approach, it's going to give you a lot of good winter interest branching down low.
And the green leaves during the spring and the summer will go from yellows to oranges and maybe sometimes even get some hints of red in them in the fall as well. Excellent, smaller, compact, multi-stemmed coral bark. Next up, we have Acer Palmatum Little Sango. This is a dwarf coral bark selection that was found as a witch's broom on the cultivar Sengokaku and was introduced by our good friend Talon Buchholz.
Yeah, this is a true dwarf. We list this one as 5 to 6 foot, even in 15 years. So one of the smaller of all of the coral bark selections. Obviously excellent for container growing for that reason as well. This one is also, being a broom, going to have a very multi-stemmed approach to it. Now, it doesn't typically have that shortened center node, and I find this one to be much more durable than some other coral barks like Fagelheim. This one tends to be a great grower for us, being a broom there on Little Sango, and one that just provides exactly what you want in that smaller statured Sangukaku.
Yeah, exactly everything you love about Sangukaku, but smaller. So excellent for container gardens, fairy gardens, providing that winter interest, or conifer troughs or conifer beds with that winter interest of that coral red bark. If you love that coral red bark on a Sangukaku, but you want something dwarf and smaller, Little Sango is an excellent choice for a dwarf coral bark selection that I think a lot of people will really enjoy.
Kind of sounds like a gunslinger to me. Like, watch out for Little Sango. So we're here at our square table for another round table discussion. This is Winter Interest Japanese Maples Part 3. So we've already done a Part 1 and 2 to this series. So we've covered a lot of different coral barks in that series. Of these on the table, Tim, do you have a favorite?
A favorite among these, I would have to go with probably Sir Damon. I think that pink-red bark gives it something a little bit different, making it a little bit brighter on the red bark, that I think it could long-term almost replace like a Sangukaku once people start understanding the color that one provides.
It's one of the brightest versions. You know, it's hard to say here what the people's choice is as far as what sells out the fastest. It could easily be Bihu or Little Sango for what, like, you know, the customers jump on the fastest. Gosh, if I was picking a favorite of this, I'd probably pick Dixie Delight. I'm always partial to the ones with a story behind them. Mike Francis Sr. was always a great friend of mine. I always called him up and talked plants, so it just has a little sentimental place for me. I love that it's multi-stem though too. I think it's really interesting in that it has that very multi-stemmed approach. So you get a little bit wider of a coral bark, and you get a little bit more of what you like about it, because with a wider one, to me, you get a little bit more winter interest even.
Yeah, that makes sense. So which of these would you pair out of the ones on this table?
So if I was going with a pairing out of what's here on the table, you know, you'd be remiss if you didn't pick Bihu as your starting point for a pairing point here. It's one of the more strikingly different ones, being the brightest yellow of all the types. I'd probably go with Sir Damon and Bihu as my pairing here. You're going to get that picked up bright pink red of Sir Damon with that neon yellow flash of Bihu. I think the two are going to provide, you know, extreme winter interest diversity there in the garden, and both being in a similar kind of growth rate, not too big. They're both going to be something that's going to pair well, but then look good in each season, you know, with each other as well.
And if you've got a smaller garden, a great pairing is something like Little Sango and Dixie Delight.
Yeah.
Because you've got a shrubbier, shorter, yellow to orange bark with a dwarf coral bark. And so those are great for the container garden if you're going for, I mean, all these can be grown in containers if you give them good drainage, but for a smaller container garden or a smaller garden, Little Sango and Dixie Delight make an excellent pairing there as well.
Excellent choices, and both being very multi-stemmed. I mean, the Little Sango, I would say, is a very popular one for people to put in multiple containers, like pairing two of those together even. You know, just two out there in the garden, that winter interest pot. You've got two of these dwarf plants, but you can't go wrong pairing it with Dixie Delight. That's a great color pattern. There are a lot of great uses to these as well. You're going to put these out in areas where you can really enjoy that winter interest. So the container garden we mentioned is a great way to grow these, but also in the conifer garden, really any of these are going to stand out in that conifer garden and provide you with some striking contrast, some deciduous flash in there in the spring, summer, fall, but then also that winter interest that really goes into the conifer garden and just gives you something a little different than you're going to get, you know, color-wise in that conifer garden, especially in the winter months.
Yeah, and all these coral bark selections or winter interest selections we're talking about today, they're good zone 6 through 9, and so they're good down to about zone 6. If you're, you can grow some of these in zone 5, but it is pushing it a little bit on some of these coral bark types. And these are ones that really give a dynamic color contrast in the landscape and garden. Japanese maples give interest in the spring and the summer and the fall especially. And then these add that extra dimension of color in that landscape and garden. Ways to talk about, again, about just piquing that color interest. Give it some sunlight. Sunlight really picks up that bark color interest. And also give yourself a background to see these plants behind.
Yeah, I was actually just about to mention that. You know, one of my favorite Bihus is there in Columbia at the Riverbank Zoo. And Andy has it there probably with that backdrop of that, it's kind of like a reddish backdrop with the gold thing behind it. And providing a backdrop for your coral barks can be an excellent way to really frame them for your pictures, to really accentuate those colors. So some of your yellows are going to look really awesome, you know, with a blue fence backdrop or a red barn backdrop, or a way to provide some contrast in that landscape. It's one of the easiest ways to get just that amazing wow factor into the plant as well.
And the key thing with coral barks, just like other Japanese maples, make sure you give them good drainage, and they're going to be a plant that gives you that 4-season interest.
Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the Mr. Maple Show. We hope you enjoyed this Japanese Maples Winter Interest Part 3.
Hey, this is just a little quicker look at some different winter interest trees. Definitely take a second and check out Part 1 and Part 2. We're doing these ongoing series where we take a deeper look at some different categories of Japanese maples. Let us know in the comments section below if there's a category that you'd like for us to cover in an upcoming video. As always, like, subscribe, and share. We greatly appreciate your patronage to Mr. Maple. So the best way to reward us if you enjoy these videos is shopping on MrMaple.com. But the second best way to reward us is sharing our videos with your gardening friends. So we greatly appreciate that. God bless.
Have a great day.
Hey, I just wanted to remind everybody about our giveaway. All you have to do to be entered is like, subscribe, and share to our YouTube channel, and then post in the comment section below, "I dig Mr. Maple." And that's going to enter you to win. You can enter under every single video. So just a reminder, every single video is a chance to win. We're getting very close. We're creeping up on it pretty fast. We're going to hit 8,000 pretty soon. And when we do, we're going to select some people to win this hat. If this is a popular thing, we may be doing more. Get involved.